This is Fountain
Every
Street
week I find
Church.
it hard to find the best ones, but somehow, like I said, you'll hear what I'm trying to say even when the words
Here,
are...
we strive to free the mind, grow the soul, and change the world. Here, there is freedom to doubt and freedom to believe. Here, you can find a house of prayer for all people.
The swallow up Jonah.
Welcome to Fountain Street Church. Join us on the journey.
Now that was a prayer. Thank you. Well, it's been a very busy week since last we were here. Over the span of more than a week, in fact, over 11,000 people came to visit us as an art prize venue. The people with the little clickers were going crazy. And last week, as I said, we had our Pledge-a-Palooza event, and it was great, great fun. You were also quite hungry. We had lots of good food, and I only heard about it. Good things. And the weather has not been more spectacular. We even get a few more days before what we know is coming will arrive. But let's enjoy it while we can, right? More soberly, I'm struggling as I listen to the question of free speech around the Westboro Baptist Church and their affliction of military funerals, and my ACLU soul wants to grant freedom of speech, and my pastoral heart is outraged. I hope the Supreme Court agonizes at least as much as I do. I'm also struggling, perhaps you are too, with the onslaught of political ads before the election, ads that are cheapening democracy by putting it up for sale, and we don't even know who's buying it, although we do know who's selling. And then I think of tomorrow, October 11th, which is National Coming Out Day for the LGBT community, and how it's being greeted by the torture and rape of a gay man in the Bronx, New York, held overnight, tied to a chair, and riots in Belgrade because they think that homosexuals are inconsistent with Serbian culture. Meanwhile, my heart is sad for smaller reasons. A man named Harold DeBoer, whom I visited a couple of years ago, died last week. He was the voiceover that announced the voice of the liberal on the radio for many years here. Life, with its large and small moments of sorrow and joy, goes on apace, whether we notice it or not. Stumbling sometimes, confident at others, confused as much as not, we are here again, hoping for a word of solace, a fragment of insight, something for the eye or the ear to cherish. And thus it is, I'm every week humbled by the task that I am here to do, and always ask that the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be found true in thy sight, O thou who art my rock and my redeemer. I delivered this message twice now, once at 9:45 and once at 11, and I said I'm going to deliver the same message I said to the early worship, and I have a soft version and a hard version, so I gave them the soft version. You're going to get the hard version. It is the same message, and there is tenderness in it, but with children there, some of the words are not necessarily as useful. There was a moment many years ago when I was in transit from one place to another, going to a conference, when I was visiting with friends, actually bunking in for the night in Louisville, Kentucky, my mother's birthplace, which is coincidental, but I remember it because of that. The woman with whom I was staying and her family happened to be the woman who had delivered our first two children. She had moved away, and so I was visiting with an old friend, and they put me up for the night in their house in a nice little room in the back. He has, by the way, a wrought iron artistic forge. An interesting fellow. She is a physician. He's a wrought iron artist. What a wonderful world we're in. At any rate, they put me in a nice little room, and I bed down for the night, and I turn out the lamp, and somewhere in the middle of the night, as often happens when you're not in your own bed, you wake up, correct? And I had an experience I've rarely had. There was absolutely no light in the room at all. I opened my eyes and beheld nothing. And of course, because I had just been asleep, I was not sure I was actually awake. Confronting absolute darkness was more than a little disturbing. It was downright terrifying. To some extent, this is what makes death itself terrifying, the beholding of nothingness. To be completely alone, utterly alone, and know that you are alone is a terrible thought. That's why that phrase that I uttered earlier is so powerful. The sky hides the night behind it and shelters the people beneath from the horror that lies above. The sky that we see is not the blackness. It is not the darkness. In fact, the darkness is beyond that. Spiritual, personal, physical, whatever it is. And that is truly terrifying. No wonder there are so many versions of immortality. No wonder there's so many hopes that we will go someplace with lots of light, going toward the light. We hear all the time to be going to a land of light because darkness is frightening. This month we are using the story of Israel in the wilderness as a spiritual metaphor for the times that we have been wandering in our lives, physically or otherwise, of being perhaps more alone than we would like. We think of wandering and traveling as pleasant, and indeed, travels can be quite wonderful if you know you're going home. But being homeless, to be on the road and not know where you are going, that's a frightening thing. And I think that fear is useful to come along with because, as someone pointed out when I was on my radio show this Friday, much of the anger in the populace is driven by fear. That they don't know where they are going, where the country is going, where life is going, and it makes them tense. So I want us to recall that fear, not because it is good, but because it's there, like the sky above the stars. Israel in the wilderness was free at last. We heard about all 10 plagues here. I think it was a little more momentous when they might have happened than the way we heard it. But I saw you out there each singing along with the chorus, 1, 2, you now know that story if you did not know it before. But I'm talking about the part that's after that, beyond the Red Sea, in the desert with no water, no shelter, no clear idea where you are or where you are going, utterly dependent on this Moses fellow who showed up one day and said, God sent me to free you. And you really wanted to be freed, so you went along with it, and suddenly you're free, and there's this guy Moses that you really don't know from Adam, forgive the expression. A fellow that you don't know at all, but it claims to be on a first-name basis with the creator and ruler of the universe. Would you buy that story? And yet to be free is worth taking a few risks, but I'm imagining they're pretty scared out there, and that's why Israel does some very stupid things, like saying, let's go back, at least we had food, or asking for water, or demanding food. They were very unpleasant people to be around. That's the place I want you to recall, that place where you don't know where you're going. And now I want to shift gears because I want to come at that fear from another angle. We all know a song. I'm going to cite it now. The stars at night are big and bright, deep in the heart of Texas. Well, I was deep in the heart of Texas years ago. I was stationed there at a church for 4 years and got a chance to wander around. And I'm sure I've told this story, but it's a powerful story in my life, so every time I tell it, I recover it. It's a story of when I was preaching in a little church about 100 miles from where I lived, across the Balcones Escarpment up on the plateau. Don, you down there, Don Pearson? Yeah, Kerrville. I was preaching in Kerrville. He's been to Kerrville. He knows what a pretty town it is. He also knows how far it is from Kerrville to Austin. All right? You got to go north to Fredericksburg, then you got to head east, come down through Dripping Springs and Bee Caves, then you come in from South Congress and you're back there in Austin. At any rate, I'm telling you this because I preached and it was an evening service because they met at another church, and I finished up and I had 100 and some miles to go before I got home. So I got in the car and was driving, went up the hill out of the valley because I think it's on not the Guadalupe, I think it's on the Trinity River. No, the Trinity's north of there.